it for this session today. Our topic for today is from conflict to resolution, managing workplace disputes. So yes, get cozy. Let us know if you have any difficulties. We'll get through them one by one. But yes, thank you so much for coming, for being here. I can see the chats. Keep them coming because this is how we can stay interactive. This is how we can hear your voice. This is also how we can hear your questions and your opinions and your comments. Yes, good day, good morning. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
For
and good
being here.
afternoon to some of you, I think.
Yes,
For those of you who might be, yeah.
be here today. Okay, as a way to get started, just to share, if you have any sort of technical difficulties, please either leave the webinar first and then re-enter, refresh your internet browser. And if all of that still doesn't work, you can reach out to our tech team and our team here who are readily available to support you. You can just chat, add Naluri events. Okay. So there are people who can support you as well. If you have any technical difficulties, if you can't hear us, or if you can't see us clearly, anything sort of, if you've tried all the troubleshooting that I've suggested and it still doesn't work, that's okay. We're here to support you. Just reach out at the chat at Naluri Events. Salam and good morning. Good morning. Okay, if you have any questions, again, we want you to be participating. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to know your opinions, your questions. Feel free to write it in the chat. We will try our best to answer all the questions as we can.
Yes.
And if you have any personal questions that maybe you don't feel comfortable sharing publicly, that's fine as well. You can just add Diana or add Deepa to directly send it to us as a private message, and we will be able to get your message as well. Okay, stay till the end of our webinar today because we will be delivering or sharing our slides in the PDF that you can download at the end of our slides, at the end of our session today. Okay, with that, I want to introduce maybe myself first, if that's okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Sharifah Diana. You can call me Diana. So I'm a clinical psychologist here in Naluri, what that means is mainly I provide one-to-one psychological intervention and therapy and support. So I've been mainly focusing a lot on thoughts using cognitive behavior therapy and emotions through emotional focused individual therapy, or known as EFIT. That's my main passion as well, with working on emotions, with working on emotional regulation. And I think that's a really relevant thing that's important in our topic with dealing with conflict and dispute. So, yes, that's a little bit about myself. You can call me Diana, by the way. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
And with that, I want to introduce and invite my esteemed colleague, Deepa.
Hi, I'm Deepa. Before that, I saw a question here asking about the recording. Yes, you will get a recording at the end of the session. So that's good. And you'll also get a copy of the slides.
Yes.
So my name is Deepa. I am actually a HR practitioner. So been in the HR world. Did psychology, but I'm not a psychologist like Diana. So I went into HR because back in the day, there wasn't much scope for psychology. So I stumbled into world of HR, absolutely loved it. So I led the HR function in a couple of places in banking and in logistics at DHL Express. Also did a role in ASEAN. So, some experience and exposure there, as well as in Roche, so in Swiss pharmaceuticals. So multi-industry. Then the last few years, I've been on my own doing freelance consulting, doing coaching, and of course, a lot of training. And am I an expert in this? Absolutely not. But I am an expert in my experience, which includes a lot of lessons learned through the mistakes I've made. So I'm hoping that together with Diana, we can offer both, the content, the experiences, anecdotal examples that will help all of you.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. I resonated with that we are sharing from our experience, and that's really, really valuable because that's something you can't learn from a textbook. So as a way to get started, actually, we wanted to ask all the audience here, how well do you currently deal with workplace conflict from a scale of 0 to 10? So please feel free to pick a number that resonates with you and type it in the chat so we can see how is everyone's levels with dealing with conflict.
One is,
one is the lowest
Yes.
point, the lowest, you would say, like, I can't deal it very well, the
At all,
worst
yeah.
at all. And 10 would be the best, like, I can handle it absolutely fine. So we'll give it but maybe a couple of minutes to see everyone's answers in. And we can see there's a variety from like 4, 5, 6,
Oh, good.
7.
Some sevens there.
Yes, 7, 6, 3, also so
Okay.
5.
Thank you for the honesty for those who put three and so on,
Yeah.
right? That's
Someone
takes a lot of courage here.
someone also said 1.
Wow. Okay, I missed the
Okay.
one, but yeah.
Yep. And then the 7, 3, 4. Yeah, you're right. It takes a lot of courage to be really honest in such a public space.
And self-aware.
Yes,
Yeah.
true.
So congrats to the person who's willing to say that. Good job.
Yes.
Good start.
I'd say 3 because I usually give in. Because as a junior, I
Ah.
usually give in.
Okay.
If conflict is involving top leaders, could be 2.
Right.
Okay.
Wow.
Something about junior and senior,
Yep.
making it a little bit
Yeah.
the
Differentiating.
yeah,
Yeah.
the ability to deal with the conflict
Oh,
a
we're
little
going
bit
to be
different.
talking about that a bit later,
Yeah,
so that's good.
that's exciting. Okay, so we can also see there's a range. So, but I would say like majority is in that range between 4 to 5 to 6,
Yeah.
7.
Yeah.
So in that middle
Yeah.
range.
Which is
Okay.
why you joined this, so that's good.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for helping us to answer that. We really appreciate your contribution and your participation. Let's go. We have another question
Yeah.
that we want to ask you, which is that what type of conflict, when you think about conflict, right, do you find most challenging? So we've listed 4 here, but if you find if there's other conflicts that we didn't list down, please feel free to write it in the chat. So the 4 technically the 4 ones that we've listed is disagreement with peers, office politics and rumors, giving feedback to authority, team members not doing their part. Okay, and the last one is others. So please specify in the chat. So we'll also give some time, but just to share, Deepa, that right now there's about 46% um, that actually clicked office politics and rumors.
Okay.
Okay,
That's
also
interesting. I didn't see that one coming, I'll be honest. But
Okay.
let's see how it pans out. And the good thing, we're asking this because we want to make sure for the next hour or so that we're able to ensure this session is fit for purpose. So where
Yes.
possible, we'll try to inject examples or hacks that you can use, to be able to address this.
Yes, and just to share, the second highest leading poll is team members not doing their part.
Okay.
Okay, and the one that's subsequent after that is disagreement with peers, and lastly is giving feedback to authority.
Right.
The lowest one. Okay, but let's see the chat. What is there if there's anything else? If we could also factor in DNI in conflict resolution would be beneficial. Okay. Noted.
So diversity and inclusion. All right. Let's see if we can do that.
Okay. Yes. I think overall the results are pretty much set and stable, which is that the highest one is office politics and rumors, as well as team members not doing their part, and then disagreement with peers, and lastly, giving feedback. So rumors, politics, as well as
team.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Again, if you have any other specific difficulties or struggles that you want to share in terms of conflict, please feel free to share it in the chat. I want to read out, there are 2 other comments. Side said, and most of the time the team members are friends with the superior outside the organization. Okay. And then Liming said, misalignment with the culture of the team, you can say it's an inclusion issue. Okay.
Yeah, possible. And it's interesting what Syed said, because when you talk about that, so you have a relationship as a professional, and then that person has a relationship. So it's a double-edged sword, I can imagine, because this, for Syed, you're talking about team members as well as office politics in this case, because they're friends outside. So I understand the challenge.
It's multiple.
Yeah,
it's a
so
gray
many
area.
layers.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, I'm not sure we can cover everything. We're definitely going to try. And so,
We'll
I'm
try our
happy to
best.
do that. And at the end, we'll leave time for questions. So we'll go through some of the areas. We hope to share some things that are meaningful. And then at the last 15 minutes or so, we'll give you time to ask more questions.
Yes. And we also hope that with some of the questions is already answered through our webinar as well,
that's right.
through our content that we've prepared for today. So yes, as a way to get started, again, thank you everyone for your participation, for helping us to answer the polls and share your what do you call that? Share your questions and your feedback. We really appreciate it. I wanted to start. I hope that's okay as
Yeah.
a way to get started. Maybe we could talk a little bit about conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
Conflict in general. What, especially in the workplace, right? What actually is conflict, and what is this purpose of conflict from your point of view,
Okay.
of what you've seen through your experience of, is this is conflict something that we want to stay away from,
Mhm.
like it's completely negative, it's awful, we should be conflict adverse,
Yeah.
or yeah, what's your take on it?
Okay. So I actually, I mean, feel that conflict can actually be a good thing, and conflict is actually needed.
Yeah.
Now, how the conflict manifests itself is a different issue altogether. And I feel at the office, what I've seen is three different main areas, main groupings. First one is miscommunication.
Yeah.
So maybe there's too much information, too little information, lack of updates. So miscommunication between parties can cause conflict.
Yeah.
So that's not a good thing. I'll come to the good thing at the end. The second one would be a misalignment, and this could be difference in opinion, right? So you want to do something a certain way, another colleague wants to do something a certain way. So that is a misalignment. And last but not least is misinterpretation, which is really sad, because then it's just about lack of understanding.
Yeah.
So while we are not measured on our intention, we are measured on our action and our output. So while we meant to do something well or say something well, it came out wrong, and that can cause conflict. So again, first one is possible miscommunication or misalignment or misinterpretation, right? So those are the three things which are conflict typically that I see at work. But what I mean by it's being good, it's good is if it's resolved well, which we're going to talk about how to do that shortly, it can actually encourage growth. It can actually provide risk mitigation opportunities. So, if somebody has a conflict, difference of opinion, what happens? It forces you to look at different perspectives. If everybody agrees with each other without conflict, it's a danger of everyone just supporting each other like a buddy, hey, great job.
Staying complacent.
Yes, complacent, and you don't, challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
So I do feel conflict can be a good thing when addressed correctly. But those are the three common ones that I see.
Okay, thank you for sharing. I really resonated with that when you said the importance of conflict, right? It helps to facilitate growth.
Yep.
Because it's like what you said, challenging the norms,
Yes.
challenging the status quo. That
Yeah.
sometimes, even though things are normal, even things are regularly done, doesn't make it the best way sometimes.
Absolutely. Just like generation gaps, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. If you think about it, if the generations don't have conflict with each other, and that's the generation gap, progress might be limited, right?
Right.
If certain norms were not challenged, maybe women still won't be voting today.
Yeah.
So there are all sorts of examples we can go back to see how conflict was handled. Not everything was handled well, but I think we need to look at it as a place and time for it.
Yes, and I again, to echo what you said, that conflict can be used really, really as a wonderful tool
Yep.
to help facilitate growth and understanding and empathy, increase
That's right.
empathy as well.
Absolutely.
From challenging different perspectives, and like you said, forcing yourself sometimes to really look at why this person is reacting this way,
Yeah.
why this person is behaving this way, why I'm reacting this way.
That's right.
Self
Starts with self.
Yes, starts with the self. Exactly, self-awareness and self, what do you call it? Regulation. Exactly. So with that being said, I was wondering, um, so we talked about what it is, its importance, and
Purpose, yeah.
its purpose, and you also mentioned about some causes, right? The three causes: the miscommunication that happens when we say something and someone interprets it differently,
Yeah.
or maybe communication doesn't happen at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like in an indirect way, or in a passive way, or in a you read my mind kind of way.
Yeah.
That can happen even in the workplace, especially in the workplace, right? As well as misalignment, not necessarily being aligned with working together, with the purpose, with the values, with the goals.
Yep.
Right? You are looking out for you, or I perceive as you looking out for you, or you looking out for the company, or for the role, or for this project or task. But what about me? My role, my purpose, my value of being here can be
That's right.
different, right?
Yeah.
And the third one is misinterpretation of your intentions,
Yes.
right? Of my intention as well being misunderstood, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've covered these bases, and I wanted to know, kind of pivot into a little bit into actually we want to talk about the science,
Okay.
right? I think what you mentioned about that conflict is healthy, conflict is important, especially when it's done in a healthy way, right? And part of it is actually to ensure that it doesn't escalate to a point of, you know,
No return.
no return. Yeah, that's one way to put it, right? So yes, let's talk about what are some of the warning signs, or some of the subtle signs that you can maybe think about with your experience, with what you've noticed, something that's maybe that you see also common in our culture.
Yeah.
Like what do we normally do, or what do you normally see that, oh, maybe there's conflict happening here, you
Yeah.
know
Yeah, so I guess, a lot of people say, again, today we are in a hybrid environment in a lot of places, or some might be still back to office fully, some might be fully remote. So the virtual nuance adds a new layer and a new complexity, right? So I think it's so easy to just say, oh yeah, we miss face to face because we can't read body language. But it's more than that. Even in physical face to face discussions, people miss body language, right? So it could be somebody who's usually very participative, very engaged in meetings or discussions, and suddenly this colleague or this, whoever it is, starts to keep quiet. So this
Mm,
is an indicator that there is something conflicting happening. So it may not be a conflict,
yeah.
but what I mean by conflicting is there's a reason why he or she has decided. Now maybe they're just having a bad day,
Yeah.
but it's up to us to really try and find out. So that would be a more sort of subtle sign, right?
Mm-mm.
Now, if it is a much more serious conflict, a situation where you really disagree with the situation, hopefully then there is the element of of speaking up about it. Then we have to address that. We'll come to that shortly, how to address spoken and verbalized conflict. But I think what we need to really watch out for is the warning signs of unspoken conflict or unspoken disagreement.
Yeah.
So one is the body language of people shutting down, not speaking up when they usually do,
Yeah.
or the reverse. The person who's usually quiet and usually quite supportive suddenly becomes very argumentative.
Yeah.
That could also be. So basically, what I'd like to summarize that, look for the opposite behaviors in individuals. It could be sign or warning of things to come, because maybe they're at this moment just a little dissatisfied.
Yeah.
It may escalate if not addressed early into sort of conflict.
Yes, thank you for sharing. Well, as you're talking, right, I was thinking about, because I love how you're talking about looking into others and finding signs within other people. I wanted to bring a perspective of in yourself, so a perspective of, am I, sometimes we are not aware that maybe we feel uncomfortable, maybe we're in distress, and that's how it can manifest, a sense of internal conflict or even external conflict. For example, if you're someone who's doing a lot of work, right, and you are taking in other people's work, and you're absorbing the emotions that come with it,
Yeah.
the dissatisfaction, the frustration, that's conflict right there,
Yes.
right? You don't necessarily feel safe to speak up, or you don't know how to speak up, for example. Either or. So that can cause a lot of stress. Your body and your nervous system can actually be in that state of fight or flight. Fight, flight, or freeze.
Freeze.
Yes, now, right?
Yeah.
Fight, or flight, or freeze. So you might notice maybe you feel more exhausted. Maybe you feel heavy. Going to work feels really dreadful, really motivating. And that is the difference that you can notice. Sometimes it's really subtle.
Yeah.
You might really not notice it. It says, oh, I'm just in this state because we've had a really long or a really tough period to close something, for example, right? So we might not realize actually, oh, it's because, and it's pent up. That's what normally happens. We keep it in, it boils up and up and up and up, and then eventually it turns either it implodes or explodes.
Yeah.
You start to explode on people. That's where the behavioral change that you can notice. The other part of it is also the internal part, where it implodes on you, and that actually how burnt out looks like.
Yeah.
You feel burnt out. You feel like, oh, I don't. What's the point of me going to work? What's the point of me doing this? I can't deal with it anymore. Let's just disappear.
So actually, on that point, I also wanted to share something, and this is from personal experience, because I used to feel that, oh, that's, I'm having this conflict with this individual. Of course, I'm not thinking that. I just feel uncomfortable. That's your body telling you things, right? Like,
Yes.
uncomfortable. I don't want to see this person. I'm going to avoid the meeting. I'm going to avoid lunchtime because we might sit next to each other. All these little signs are, telltale signs. You don't realize that you're having this conflict with the individual.
Yeah.
But one thing I realized that I never did enough, and I started doing more, is to ask myself, am I taking offense? I.e., am I feeling that there's a conflict when actually there isn't? So is it
Mm.
my problem? So what is the trigger that's causing me? How come? So I'll just give an example. If somebody today stands in front of 10 people and shouts at everyone and says, you're all just stupid, I bet you out of everyone, some people will think, well, you're stupid for shouting at us. Who does things like that? But somebody might feel it and say, oh my God, how come he said I'm stupid? I feel stupid. And that's a personal trigger, right? Because
Yeah.
how come majority don't feel that way? So similarly, I had to really take a hard look at myself, realizing that, wait a minute, before I before I take offense, is it really what the person meant to do? So give benefit of doubt as a starting point before you feel that there is a conflict in the first place. I think that's
Yes.
important as well.
Yes. And I think that's also a great way to pivot into maybe some techniques and hacks, as you
Yep.
mentioned, about how to resolve conflict. Because on top of what you mentioned about um, giving benefit of the doubt, in order to give benefit of the doubt is to actually pause and really practice the skill of emotional regulation, right? Is to actually notice, oh, am I when I'm in that state, what am I feeling? What am I thinking about? Where do I feel it in my body? What is happening with me right now, right? And that awareness, that kind of practice takes some time, actually checking in with yourself and practicing to ask yourself genuinely and to be honest with yourself
Mm,
genuinely, because we
absolutely.
can also have a tendency to be like, you know what, just brush it off, brush it under the rug, minimize it, intellectualize it.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm feeling this way, but since that everyone's okay with it, that's fine. It's just me. Again, it's um it can be part of the swallowing again that
Yeah.
happens, that can be stored in your body as pent up stress,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, exactly. So part of it is pausing, part of it
Yeah.
is actually thinking and reflecting.
Correct.
Okay, is
On
this
yourself.
really,
Yeah.
have I noticed this situation when someone told me I'm stupid, it really made me upset. What does that mean?
And how come no one else felt upset? So that's the
Yes.
indicator, right? How come I feel the conflict? How can they talk to me like that? Thus, there is a conflict. But
Mm.
it was, it's just a simple example, but it's a powerful one for me to make me realize that, Deepa, before you think they meant to offend you, ask yourself, are you taking offense for no valid reason? So
Yes.
that's just a, yeah.
Yes.
But maybe I'll share one hack now about how you can give feedback. And, if we go to the next slide, sorry. Yeah. So something that I'd like to share is this concept that when you share positive feedback, so obviously you don't have to worry about that. There's no conflict. We'll come to the negative in a minute. You personalize positivity, you neutralize negativity. So let me just give you an example of that, a very simple example, and everyone can relate to this. So let's say you want to tell, you see, it's a very different message. If I tell somebody, wow, that dress looks good, that's fine, right? That's a neutral message. But if I say you look good in that dress, suddenly that elevated compliment has become taken a whole new meaning. But if I think the dress isn't nice, it's better for me to say that dress is not as flattering versus you don't look good in that dress. You see the difference? It's just a simple change, but I neutralize when it's negativity because now I've made the onus on the dress versus the individual.
I love
But
that.
when I want to personalize the feedback, I make it about the person. So if you look over here, we talk about a workplace. I've given some examples here. You did a great job at the presentation, as I noticed that you had the audience fully engaged when you spoke. Now, if I am getting that feedback, I feel I did it, right? And so you personalize that positivity. But if you want to give feedback because there's a conflict of opinion, in this case, between how you saw the presentation was what the person did, then I would say, because I don't want the person to feel bad, but I need to deliver the message. So I won't say your presentation needed more info. Your message didn't get the audience. Well, I'll be so offended.
Yeah.
Instead, I would say the presentation needed more updated data so
Mhm.
the audience could relate to its relevance as opposed to your data's relevance.
Yes.
So it's something so simple. Is it going to work all the time? No. But has it worked for me very humbly, may I say it's worked for 70 to 80% of the time,
Yes.
because it's personalized positivity, neutralized negativity. This
I
is
love
about
that.
addressing the conflict when you have it.
Yes. Thank you for sharing. Can I just add two
Please.
things? This concept, first things first, I wanna from a psychology mental health perspective, how why this works is essentially it's about language,
Mm,
right? The power of language. Language is our tool to express and to it's also a big part about our mental and emotional health, right? It's how we perceive ourselves, it's how we perceive others. So exactly, about tweaking just the language from saying you suck or you're awful versus that was awful.
yeah,
It's a big difference
yeah,
because it helps to, like you said, personalize, and you are able to mentally and emotionally take a step back
that's right.
from that negative feedback or message and say, okay, it's not so much about me being a terrible person,
Hmm.
but it's about my actions that could have been improved.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because then you'll be able to take ownership. I mean, for those of you who are parents, especially of young children, I'm sure you've heard this before. Label behavior, not the person.
Yeah.
You'd say you're a good girl, but you shouldn't be saying you're a bad girl all the time, and the child starts internalizing that. But that's
Yes.
separate, but similar concept. So personalized positivity, neutralized negativity.
Yes. Compliment on the effort, on the results.
Yeah,
It's like, wow, I see your effort. You did a great job, rather than complimenting them as a,
person.
yes, as a
Yes.
person. Exactly. With that being said, you wanted to share a little bit more about the next one, right?
Yes. And I think this will feed in quite nicely to the second highest poll part, which is about the team members also not doing their part. Now, that's not the example I have here, but this is a feedback model which is used quite popularly. You can find it even on the web and so on. But I wanted to show some examples. So it's called SBI, which means you talk about situation, behavior, impact. And the reason it's different from common practice a lot of the time is we usually stop at behavior. So we
Mm.
usually stop at saying, so as an example, so situation is the same example. The second part on behavior impact, I've given two different variations if you can have a look. So let's say the feedback is at the meeting last Monday on the new product survey. So option one, talk about the behavior. What is noticeable? I noticed that the slides presented had data from over 3 years ago. All right. Now, a lot of the time we stop there. Then what's missing is the so what. So the impact ends up anchoring the fact that something needs to change. And that's the power of the SBI feedback. Because a lot of times we say, hey, I noticed you didn't kick the ball properly. You see, that's why it was like it's off. You're not kicking it properly. But so what? Okay, if you stand correctly, then the goal positioning is right and so on. So you can even use it in social settings. So situation, behavior, and then the impact is the team was not able to make a decision with what's considered outdated info. So this needs to be refreshed by next Monday. So the impact and what needs to change has to happen. Now, when you give this type of feedback in a conflict situation, remember, it could be two people who are not happy with each other. You want to try and do it in as short a time as possible. So, for those of you who want to start crafting or trying out a SBI model, try and do it in 30 seconds. That's the challenge you can do.
Ooh.
Because nobody's going to sit and listen to you one long story about how you have conflict with them with the SBI model. Try and deliver it short and sweet. So,
Wow.
let's try the second example. Yeah. So at the meeting last Monday, now this is feedback to a supervisor or a team member. All right, so think about it like that. At the meeting last Monday on the new product survey, there were words used, notice it's neutral, and I'll tell you why. There were words used such as stupid, idiot, and some foul language targeted right at me. Wow. Now, if you stop right there, they'll be like, hey, yeah, you're so sensitive. You're so this. They could do that. That could be what they think.
Yeah.
But in my 30 seconds, I immediately go to, I felt humiliated and embarrassed as others were at the meeting too, and they were just staring at me. Now, suddenly, personalizing the positivity is one thing. In this case, when the impact is negative, I personalize it to me. You know why? If I said, you humiliated and embarrassed me, no, who said I did that? But
Mm.
when I say I felt humiliated and embarrassed, you cannot say who said you feel that. How can anyone tell you how you feel?
Exactly.
So again, be very purposeful in your language and keep that intentional communication by keeping the neutrality of the negative. There were foul words used. There were words you were shouting at me. That is very sensitive if you're telling your boss, you were shouting at me, you use foul. Of course, you can't say that to superior, but you can say, there were words used that were very negative and so on, and I felt humiliated.
Yeah.
So SBI is a model. Please read up more about it. You'll find it on the web, but I find it particularly useful, whether it's authority feedback, peer feedback, and OT.
Nice. I love this. I think it's a what to say. I think it's very similar to another technique
Okay.
that we also commonly use, not just specifically in workplace, but also in like general with your whenever you want to talk about something that's really difficult, we call it I statements. Yeah, so
Yes.
it's like exactly like what you said, personalizing how it impacts you.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because that's also when we challenge the perspective. It's like it's rather than pushing it away, being like, oh no, no, it kind of stops that sense of invalidation for it to happen.
Yep.
And to be like, no, this is how I feel. I'm allowed to feel this way, right? And this is how it has impacted me, and this is what I need about it. So the I statements actually just uses I feel
Yeah.
what,
Right.
right? And then when this happened, so the behavior as
Yeah.
well, similarly. And I would like the you're looking for a solution or a change, like what you said.
Correct.
I would like for you to stop, for
Yes,
example. I
that's
would
right.
like for you to maybe not use those words next
Yes,
time,
that's
right?
right.
So it's I resonated with that because I feel like
Yeah.
this feedback model sometimes it really helps, because giving feedback for me personally can be really scary.
Yeah, it's daunting.
Receiving feedback can be really scary because it's so scary. We don't know
Yeah.
how people will receive, and that's what I hear a lot as well in my practice. That they're like, oh, I really want to say something, but I'm so afraid
Yeah.
of either them not understanding or them, gaslighting me or like invalidating how I feel or what I've been through. So it does take a lot of, I would also say a lot of courage, one, and also a lot of self validation
That's
to
right.
be like, you know what, regardless of whoever or what has happened, this has impacted me.
Yep.
And I'm again, what is the purpose or
Mhm.
intention of this conversation of this discussion?
That's right.
It's for me to which is part of the purpose of conflict resolution, which is to protect. I
Yeah.
feel to protect and strengthen the relationship.
Yeah.
For me to express that this has been hurtful,
Yeah.
this has not been helpful, for example. And how do we ensure that you know we respect each other, we respect each other's boundaries, and be able to work together and live
Yeah.
harmoniously, right?
Yeah. And actually, on that point, the reality is nobody is comfortable giving feedback. I mean, especially negative or, developmental feedback, right? But one of the things that I also learned, again, a mistake I used to make is I used to say, okay, I'm ready, like so gung ho, and go in and I'm going to give feedback and stuff. And I'd fail, right? One thing I realized is when I'm uncomfortable, saying you're uncomfortable and having that vulnerability of admitting that at the start actually helps. So, for example, if I want to give Diana feedback, and it's a bit I'm awkward because I'm going to tell her something negative. What I will start is I'll say, Diana, I need to talk to you today, and actually I'm really feeling uncomfortable on how to share this with you because I really don't want you to take offense about what I hope it'll come out the right way, and I'm going to try, but please hear me out. So
I
just
love
doing that as a precursor for first 10 seconds, 15 seconds, but still SBI, ladies and gentlemen, 30 to 40 seconds, because you want to have it land quickly enough that it doesn't have a what did she just say? So it has a good impact, but still short and sweet.
Exactly. I love that. I think what you're trying to do is, from my perspective, or which is that to just introduce a sense of humility and empathy.
That's right.
And just
Yeah.
being kind,
Yes.
and just reminding that this is going to be a hard conversation, but in the fundamentals of it, we're both human, we're
Yeah.
both flawed, and this is hard for me to say.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this out of maliciousness or intent to harm you or hurt you, but so that you understand that this is a struggle for me too.
Absolutely.
But it's a conversation that is important in
Yeah.
order for us to whatever the purpose of the conflict is, right? Or the resolution is for,
Yeah.
which is that we either need to improve or we need to, be a little bit mindful and so forth. It
Yeah.
depends on what it is, and I think that's lovely. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Okay, with that being said, Yes, this is part of also
Yeah.
with all the feedback. I think what was mentioned with giving feedback, um, it was also mentioned that part of it is to stay mindful and grounded with
So,
yourself, right?
yes, that's right.
And not just for the person giving the feedback, can also be the person receiving the
Absolutely.
feedback, right?
So, I mean, one thing that I wanted to share is maybe this is what I would call a failure and a success story rolled in one,
Mm.
where I had a conflict with the CEO. So this is when I was the HR director in one of the organizations. The CEO is a foreign national, and I was having a chat with him. So let me just paint the picture very quickly for you to understand. So it was a Monday when I went to see him. So there are two different scenarios. So this is what I mean by failure and success. So the first day was a great meeting. On the Monday afternoon, we were talking about a new idea, and he shared something that he wanted to do. I was adding to it. We were having a great conversation. At the end of the conversation, I was so feeling really good about myself. And then he said, "You know what, Deepa, I love working with you. You're listen to the words, right?" He said, "You're passionate. You're highly engaged, and you're so dynamic. I love it. I love working with you." Because I was obviously, very excited and eager and speaking about all these things. So that was the Monday, yeah. Then on Wednesday, we found out there was a major disciplinary issue where one of the staff stole money, quite a sizable amount, about 4,500 from a client. And obviously, that's not something you can tolerate. Now, this person had about 18 years service with the company. So it's not nice to have to do what we have to do. But as you know, there's a principle of integrity. So when I went to see the CEO this time, same sort of behaviors. And I talked about this. And then he said, "Oh, no, but he's got 18 years. Maybe." We said, "But the reality is we've made it very clear in this line of work, especially integrity is important. We can't sort of just give this person a getaway, get out of jail card free. So we have to take action." So I was talking to him, explain all this, and then he said, wait, Deepa, wait, don't be so emotional." And then I was stopping and asking myself, wait a minute. So, I mean, I really am grateful that I had the presence of mind to say what I did. Plus, he's quite open minded. I said, wait a minute. 2 days ago, when I spoke to you with the same amount of energy, but I agreed with you, you said I
Mm.
was passionate, dynamic, and engaged. Today, when I'm speaking with the same amount of energy, but I disagree, you're saying I'm emotional?
Mm.
I don't know what made me say that, but I just said it openly because I knew that he's quite open minded also as a boss. And he said, and believe me, this is what I mean. It was a failure on my part, but the success was he said, "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize that. I need to check myself. You're right. You're just the same thing. You just happen to disagree." But what I meant by the failure in doing that, but the success that came from it is I realized, but it's true. Why do I need to come across as being, it came across as being argumentative, but I was just being passionate, just as I was passionate when I agreed. So
Mm.
now my hack for myself, when I speak to people of authority and senior clients or leaders, if I'm going to disagree, I try to be a bit more poker faced. So this is what I mean by lesson learned. So it was a failure on that part, but he was very open minded. And my success today is I now know if I'm going to disagree strongly with a client or somebody senior, inside will be all going haywire, but I will sit there and say, yeah, maybe we need to consider. So it doesn't come across like I'm agitated and argumentative. So that's just a
Nice.
little hack that you can do. Check yourself. When you want to agree, be passionate. But when you want to disagree with authority, maybe just take a chill pill, let the insides go haywire, but then calm yourself
Like
down.
neutralizing
Neutralizing yourself.
the feedback. But
So, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to just use this to say, remember, before you look at others, we need to look at ourselves, right? So, again, is the conflict valid? And how do I do that? I now use the 4 A's. I like to use acronyms because it's easy to remember. First one is I'd ask myself, why do I feel the way I do? So, back to that earlier, very silly example of 10 people being called stupid. How come I felt it? Like, how come I'm stupid? So, is it because, second A, acknowledge where the trigger is from? Is it
Mm.
because I personally feel I'm not good enough in that line of work I'm doing, or I suddenly felt that I wasn't competent? So it might be my own trigger, right? As opposed to that. So I need to acknowledge that. Now, once I've acknowledged, I need to act on it. So either I decide, no, Deepa, this is just you being silly because you don't like science and this was something related to science. And so you think that they're questioning your ability. So take action on it and resolve it to prevent it from happening. But the reality is sometimes we just can't do anything about it. So don't dwell on it. Make sure you acknowledge it, wallow for a little while, feel sorry for yourself for a minute or two if you need to, and then we just need to move on. Because the minute you start dwelling on it, the conflict starts escalating, and suddenly that little comment of stupid can affect so many things. Even things like unconscious bias. The next time I see that person, I'm going to say, oh, this person thinks everyone is stupid, and I won't give him or her a fair chance. So there are so many things that can happen without self regulation. So the first thing is ask yourself, acknowledge where it's coming from, act on it if you can. And if you can't, ladies and gentlemen, we just have to accept the reality and move on.
Mm.
Easier said than done, but we
Yeah.
have to try and find a way.
Yeah, exactly. Easier said than done. I'm just reflecting on myself, how, because you're right about when conflict happens and when we don't resolve the internal things that happens within us, like our own emotions that get stuck, that get suppressed, that get pressed down. Yes, it's gonna be hard to not dwell on it, to not move on from it, because it's also that happens, the kind of fear or the kind of biases that we develop is also one of our body's way of learning from the past, and also trying to protect ourselves from threat in the
Mm-hmm.
future,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just trying to protect yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that sense. But sometimes it can be unhelpful, in the ways that it becomes a little bit it becomes a little bit dysfunctional in that sense,
Yeah.
where I'm in a healthy workplace, or I'm with people, or this is a completely different leader,
Mm-hmm.
right, who is showing me kindness, who's showing me how to say who's showing me kindness, who's showing me
Compassion.
compassion, who's respectful, but I still feel so anxious, I still feel so guarded. I can't open up, I can't be close, I'm always second guessing, you know
Yeah.
and that is a reflection of that conflict is still somewhat the internal conflict from what has happened, or the
Yes.
experiences you've been through
It's still
has
there.
is still not there. So, and with that being said, that happens. It's not an isolated experience. A lot of us go through that,
Mm.
even myself included. Like, I would say one of the biggest struggles I deal with conflict is that remnants
Yeah.
of how do I
The
not stay
past.
stuck.
Yeah.
How do I not say everyone can't be trusted.
Mhm.
How do I open my heart to a sense of possibility, and feel safe, and
Mm.
feel that passion again,
Yeah.
feel good, and feel like, okay, it's a pretty safe world, or a pretty safe environment. And a lot about that is about the inner work.
Yes.
you know the the awareness,
Yeah.
awareness of that you are experiencing this, that you are that to
Going
acknowledge,
through.
yeah, that you're going through it, and to also acknowledge what you've been through,
Yeah.
to give yourself that self validation
Mhm.
of what has happened, which actually is, yeah, the points I wanted to share in the slides. To acknowledge what has happened, to label what is happening, right? And then also to it's not related to this, because this regulation techniques is more in the moment. I will get
Okay.
to it, but what I'm talking about is more on the, I guess, the deeper inner work,
Okay.
right? About what what are my beliefs that I have internalized from the experience I've gotten, and how has that impacted my perspective on
Mm.
things today,
Nice.
right? The biases,
Okay.
my behaviors, my emotions, my body being triggered,
Mhm.
right? And is it aligned with
Mhm.
reality? Is it really appropriate? Is it dysfunctional? Is it unhelpful?
Yep.
Is it disrupting my life? Right? So that's part of it lah. I would say that's why I really resonated when you said it's easier said than done to not dwell on it.
Yeah.
If you are dwelling on it, that's okay. That's part of the process of being human, and that you're not alone in this process, and that you can get support as well. I will share at the end today, if you feel like you're being stuck and you want to progress, or you feel like you want to understand yourself more, we have resources for you to tap into. But with that being said, just to share something, yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is also important, like you talked about, not wanting to dwell on it, is, and I heard this saying once and I thought it was really powerful, difficult again to implement, but so simple to understand, which is we cannot control our first thought, but we
Mm,
can control our second thought.
yeah.
And so I thought I take that to heart. So every time one thought creeps in, and it's a whether it's an imposter syndrome, yes, even in my ripe old age, I have imposter syndrome sometimes. And we talk about things like, oh God, can I do it? Can I face? Am I good enough? And all those questions. What will they think of me? All those questions that come to mind are my first thoughts. Then my second thought, I need to go back to say, look, why are you dwelling on this? What? You've already earned your stripes. You are here doing what you're doing. So just feel good about it and do your best. That's all. So again, remember, we cannot control our first thoughts all the time because it just pops in, but we need to consciously find a way to control the second so that we can change that. I like
I
that.
love that. You what you're practicing is actually being compassionate to yourself.
Yeah.
You're giving yourself that support. And again, it's very, very important in the language that you
That we
talk,
use.
because it can go south.
Yeah.
For example, like your first feeling or your first thought is like, oh, am I really good enough for this? Can I do this? And so forth. And if your second narrative is, why are you thinking like this? You should stop it.
That's
You
right.
know, you should just get over it. It's just whatever, for example.
Yes.
Right? That can
Helps. Yeah.
that can not necessarily be helpful, versus
Yes.
actually noticing and being a little bit more compassionate, supportive, kind to yourself, and being like, wait a minute, you know, let's breathe through this.
Yeah.
You've got this. You've done this before, and you can definitely do this.
Yeah.
So let's go through it together, kind
That's
of
right.
situation, like holding your own hand. So yes, thank you for sharing. I do wanted to share a little bit for those who, like I said, in the situations that you feel your fight or flight is being triggered, fight or flight or freeze. But I would say specifically fight or flight, a way to regulate any sort of emotion can be anger, can be any sort of heightened emotion, right? Anger and uh, anxiety, can be stress,
Fear.
right? Fear, exactly. Is to The first thing is to pause. Pausing before reacting is the greatest tool of all, because one of the things that we do is we sometimes react.
Yeah.
We just, I feel like this, I'm gonna punch the wall. I feel like this, I'm gonna say something hurtful, right? So it's actually building that attunement to pause, to notice that your body is being riled up, to be like, oh, wait, what's happening? Let's pause. Let's take a breather, right? Let's take a walk. Let's drink some water, right? Counting the five, stepping away. Anything that can help you to pause before you react. So we want to be more responsive. We are responding rather than reacting. And the difference is that with responding, you are mindful. You feel like you're in control with what you say
Absolutely.
and do, right? And the second one is, again, part of neutralizing or validating your emotions to help it pass through and not stay stuck, is to actually label it, to name it and say, oh, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. And most of the time, it won't make the emotion completely go away, but it would help to give a sense of clarity, and which then reduces its intensity.
Yeah.
So it gives you a sense of, again, better control, better stability, and a clearer mind, or a clearer head, to handle what is happening.
And I think, if I may
Yeah.
add, one thing that you mentioned earlier is, so don't say, I'm scared and I'm anxious, because don't label yourself, label the emotion. So if you feel fear and you feel anxiety, then you can isolate that versus making you somebody who's always scaredy cat. You don't want to be known as that for yourself. You want to be kind to yourself. So say,
Yeah.
I'm
I feel
feeling
it.
scared in this situation. I'm feeling anxious on how to speak to him or her, which is very different from I have anxiety. Yeah. That's why. So I have anxiety versus I'm anxious are two different things. So please make sure we talk correctly to ourselves.
Again, yeah, it's part of not it's part of neutralizing it. It's
Yes.
taking a step back from it, saying that you're allowed to experience, you are experiencing these feelings and experiences, but it's not your identity. It's not you. I'm not this angry person. I am someone who experiences anger.
Yeah.
So yes, and yeah, to mention about using I statements, if you feel you have the capacity to express how you're feeling, I feel frustrated, I feel angry when this happens. Sometimes it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
It can be really tough, so use any sort of techniques that works with you, in that sense, where to write it down if you need a script, something to help you through it. Or again, to take pauses, that is absolutely fine. And again, with mindfulness and grounding techniques, to focus on regulating your fight or flight mode to back to your relaxed mode, through deep breathing, through scanning your body, to visualizing a sense of safe place, to remind yourself, okay, I'm not in that threat, this my smoke alarm. It's like a smoke alarm.
Yeah.
Our bodies, when you've gone through negative experiences, so your smoke alarm has been triggered before, right? It's the fire has gone, and it's right. It
Ah,
turns on. So what
nice
happens?
analogy.
Yeah, what happens after that is, it might become a little bit more um, easily triggered.
Sensitive. Yeah.
Yes. So sometimes we get the smoke alarm gets triggered by just burnt toast.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, this person made a slight comment, or this person looked at me a
Yes.
certain
There you
way.
go. Yeah.
So but it's like not a full blown fire. It's just
Mm.
maybe smoke from burnt toast. So that's something to notice and understand and self reflect more, to see how is my own smoke alarm. Is it
Good.
calibrated, or does it need some recalibration? Okay, with that being said,
Okay.
yes.
So before we go to the questions shortly, let's just do a quick recap of some of the content that we shared. So you started by saying, remember, before we decide we are in the situation of conflict, check ourselves. Are we taking offense before we give people benefit of the doubt? So was it a, accidental, came out wrong and stuff like that? The 4 A's, we talked about it, to make sure you ask yourself, acknowledge where it's coming from, where's the root cause of the trigger, act on it if you can't, and otherwise you have to accept it and move on. Easier said than done, but remember, you can't control your first thought. Be conscious of your second, and so on. The SBI feedback model, the situation, behavior, and impact. When you stop at behavior alone, there's pushback. When you talk about the impact, the so what comes out, it's powerful, and try and do it within 30 to 40 seconds to be able to hit home. And of course, when you give compliments, when you talk positively, personalize the message with a lot of yous or the person's name. When you want to give negative feedback, and you should try and confront, and give that feedback to the person whom you have a conflict with, but neutralize the negativity, both depending on the message and the audience. And last but not least, for my side, I think it's important to say you need to watch for unspoken conflict. So right at the start, we talked about it, which is whether it's silence or asking too many questions, putting yourself in their shoes to find out why their behavior has suddenly changed. Right. And I think this is something that, if you look at this as well, back to the earlier poll, we talk about politics and rumors. If the politics is a source from a certain individual, I would even challenge ourselves to confront that person. And you can even apply a simple personalized positively, neutralize negativity SBI model to challenge why this politics or this rumors is going around. The problem with rumors and politics, it festers around. If you are willing to go to the source to nip it in the bud, I may humbly encourage all of you to do that. Please try that.
That's great. Thank you for your 5 takeaways. To continue on what we've talked about today, which is also essentially there's similar techniques to just accentuate Deepa's points, which is emotional regulation, to be mindful, to be responsive then rather than reactive. So how do we actually build that is through being mindful with our body, by practicing mindfulness, doing grounding techniques, and breathing skills. So I put all these terms so that if after the webinar you can also do your own reading. So and this is a starting point for you to understand and at least have the language on how to build it as well. And then also active listening skills. So it's also similar to, instead of being reactive, it's to pause, it's to listen, it's to self validate and validate. If you're able to validate yourself, then it's also hopefully reverse as well, so you're able to stay open and have difficult conversations to resolve conflict in a healthy way, right? And then psychological safety, to also, is a great point to just question, am I a safe person?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I explicitly, or maybe I don't even notice that I carry a lot of judgment. And the way for you again to just know is to reflect on yourself. What are your own values? Do you judge yourself a lot? And is the judgment so deeply painful? And it's so critical and harsh, right? And then building your emotional intelligence to again increase your self-awareness, to understand your smoke alarm, does it need recalibration or not, and to again increase kindness and empathy, which then ties into just naturally being a bit more compassionate towards yourself, towards others, to notice and to highlight your efforts and the things that you've done and your own growth in your own personal way. Okay, with that, thank you so much. We just wanted to share again, some support and resources that Naluri has to offer. So in that goes beyond from our session and our webinar today, which is that firstly we have a free 24/7 Naluri text line. So in any case that if you need support that you want to message immediately, we have professional counselors and mental health support at hand that are private and confidential as well. Okay, and they're completely free. So the numbers are displayed here that you can take a snapshot or you can download the slides for your easy keeping. Besides that, we also have one-to-one Naluri consultation. So, like I mentioned earlier, if you want to understand yourself more, or if you notice that it's a little bit hard, you just need more support, and you want to talk a little bit deeper, you can also scan this QR code to book a session with me or any of our Naluri health coaches that we have on the website and available as well. Besides that, we also have a free emotional well-being assessment. This is a great way again for you to get started to know like how am I doing, how are my emotions doing. Sometimes we don't know. We have been feeling numb or we've been feeling numb for some time. So a great way to get started is maybe by doing this assessment. So you can scan the QR code again to answer the question. And again, it's 100% anonymous and it's free. So you can do it on the app or on the website as well. On top of that, we also have the Naluri app and web. So you can download the Naluri app in any case that if you want to have further discussions or questions that you may have from today that we didn't cover specifically or we may have missed it, you can chat with our coaches, our mental health coaches, as well as all other coaches that we have on our platform. We have also executive coaches if you want to talk a little bit deeper about your career growth and so forth and this career disputes. And you can scan the QR code displayed here to download the app or to visit the website. And yes, as a way to stay connected, if you enjoyed this session, if you want to know more and you want to stay tuned to more of this type of webinars and sessions, feel free to stay connected. You can scan the QR code to stay connected through Facebook, and on the bottom, you can stay connected through Instagram. Okay. And yes, that would be the end of our resources, and we're going to allocate some time now to answer all your questions. So in the meantime, we also have a pop-up now that we want to encourage you to leave any feedback. Feedback is helpful. Feedback is important. We want to know what worked well and what we want to ditch. But besides that, you can also start to download the slides, the handouts as well in the handout section. And as you guys are going through all of that, we also want to go through the questions now. So I'll go to the most bottom one because that's the earliest question. Yeah. Okay, so the flow. So the question is by Esther. Dave asked, office politics. Something is ongoing with one of the teams in the department. How do we manage and make sure some people don't speculate and maintain professional?
Okay. So for me, the first thing is, again, I'm assuming something ongoing might be a personal matter. So what I call is, I call it sensitive communication and public confidentiality. So balance those words, right? What does that mean? You need to address these issues with the team. So if you're a leader, I assume this is somebody who's, maybe a team leader. So you have something going on with the team member, but you have to balance that confidentiality, but people need to know. So what I would do is I would actually say it exactly as how you've written. So I might call a team meeting and I'll say, guys, I just need to let you know, I'm handling something separately where Deepa is going through something. I've got that covered with her. In the meantime, I hope you understand she may be out of office here and there. Those kind of things happen because I had that situation with one team member where personal problems going through, which ended actually in a divorce. So it was really quite sad for her situation. So in the lead up to it, as you can imagine, she had so many things happening. But you don't want to tell everybody she's working through a divorce because that's not for you to tell. So that's the confidentiality you have to balance. But you owe it to your team to say that you may find that Deepa is not here all the time. I've got it covered. Working with her, we'll know what to do about the work. So you're showing that you empathize with the team, but you also have compassion to this individual on what's happening. Wow. So you have to balance.
Nice. Okay, so it's balancing open communication. I think it's important to communicate,
but sensitive to the confidentiality.
Exactly. Yeah. So knowing also your boundary.
Yes.
That this is not for me to share, and like we can still work together in that sense, and you guys uh are worthy that you guys should know about this.
Yes, that's
That's
right.
what. Okay. So yes, we thank you for answering that and for the question. We have another question. So how do we overcome the fight,
It's
flight,
yours, I
freeze
think.
situation? Yeah. So with specifically fight or flight, I would say to notice which state you are in if you can. So it's to understand. Part of it is a lot of self discovery in a sense where you learn about uh, how the signs show up in you. You know, if for example, my own fight or flight could be my heart starts racing. I get immediately tense. My head is racing. Sometimes to a point I get headache, like a migraine, and I get shoulder aches or neck
Mm,
pains.
wow.
You know, so this is when I know, okay, I'm being in that state. And a part of it is again, it's doing a lot of grounding.
Mhm.
It's doing a lot of mindful type of work. It's doing a lot of breathing. It's taking a pause. It's slowing down because a lot of times fight or flight is when we feel like we're in threat, we are in danger. So it's about neutralizing and again stabilizing our sense of body
Mhm.
through breath work, through breathing deeply,
Mm.
box breathing, pausing. Again, a lot of pausing and slowing down. Humans, we need to actually really slow down our pace a
Breathe.
little bit.
Yeah.
you know but yes, that hopefully that with freeze in particular. So freeze mode, what I've read so far is that it can just be doom scrolling on your phone
Mm.
for hours, and you don't and suddenly you feel just you're rotting.
Mhm.
Like, so another part of a technique that's mentioned is to actually move. I can't recall exactly what the name is, the scientific name for this, but it's a technique from EMDR, eye movement desensitization, R.
Uh,
Okay, so it's actually just moving your eyes from left to right. Because what happens when we're doom scrolling, we're just
Up and
focusing,
down. Yeah.
we're just staring at one
One.
spot.
Oh,
So
okay.
when we're staring at one spot, it's evolutionary saying like, oh, I'm staring at a threat. I'm
Mm.
staring at a tiger. I'm making sure I don't lose the sight of the
Mm.
tiger so that I don't die,
Mm.
right? So it's when we look left and right. So one of the advices is also going for a walk. Because
Mm.
when you go for a walk, you go outside, you see things. Your eye is
Yeah.
moving.
Micro breaks. At work,
Yes.
it's really important, micro breaks. Yeah. I,
Yes.
I have, some of you will know Friends sitcom, of course. I have three favorite 2 to 3 minute segments that I keep on my phone. And when I need a stress relief, I just go and watch it because
Yeah.
that 2 to 3 months changes your the system, and you just feel just a little bit lighter. So,
Yes. And that's part of it as well, changing the biochemistry that
mm.
happens, like dancing, for example, or singing, like doing a karaoke, like something that boosts my energy. So that helps to also take you out of that fight or flight or freeze mode.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for the question. So we have another question. How about if they are just rude and using the statement, this is how I am, as an excuse?
This is interesting. There are many such cases like that, sometimes from the boss, sometimes from the team. Again, I'm a big believer in trying to talk straight right at the start, which means I will throw that statement back to them. So if they say, this is how I am, then what I might say is, I won't use the word. The other thing that I think is important, which I try to do, is I don't like to say I understand because I don't really understand their perspective, but I hear your view, or I listen to what you're saying. However, saying this is how I am is not working in this situation, right? Because we're trying to come to a resolution. Remember, you must decide, is the relationship worth more than the issue at hand?
Mhm.
That is the question. Now, if it's a one-off interaction, you're finding a supplier and there's a conflict, that doesn't matter really, because even if it doesn't end well, it's just a one-off thing you purchased. But at work, we want to make sure the relationship takes precedence over the issue. So tell them, I understand. Don't say I understand, just say I hear you saying that this is how I am, but the reality is we need to work on a solution here together, right? So can we try and figure out something else? Because what I am feeling is, remember, going back to the I statements. So try that approach, because usually people don't want to be the bad guy. So if you tell them you are feeling really scared about attending this meeting on your own, well, the person is forcing you to do so, and you explain that situation, it's very hard to push back. No, no, you don't feel scared. So try and find a place which is a neutral spot where you talk about the issue, not about the people involved. So you throw it back to them. I hear that you say that this is how you are. However, we need to get a resolution here. So please understand, I am feeling embarrassed. I am feeling scared. I am feeling anxious, and so on.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for answering.
Sure.
Okay. Hope that answers your question. We will go to the next one. Any suggestions? I think this is something I really want to know also. Any suggestions on resetting relationships that have been affected due to handling situations poorly in the past? So especially if you are the one who could have delivered the feedback review in a better way.
Ah, okay. Again, I go back to the rule of it's always better to talk straight from the start. So I will start off the conversation. So let's say it's with Diana. If I were to mock role play here, I'll say, Diana, can I see you for a minute? And then I'll say, I realize I was reflecting on what happened the last time around when you spoke about the feedback review, and I think I could have done better. So this is the areas. Now I will show that not am I just saying that as lip service, but I actually mean it, which means I got to do a bit of homework. Huh? So I got to go back and reflect. So I love the fact that this person asked the question because it shows a lot of self-awareness.
Yes.
So first thing I will do is write down, I didn't take it seriously. I was quite nasty when I gave her this feedback. So I will write down the behaviors, the actions that I took that didn't work the last time based on my self-reflection, and I will open up the conversation. So I'll say, for example, Diana, I think I mentioned here that you were very lazy, isn't it? And I really didn't mean that. I came across really badly. I'm sorry that happened. So you must be willing to apologize, number one. After you offer 2 or 3 self-reflection moments where you think you could have done better, then you open it to them to show that you're truly willing to listen. And then you say, so Diana, that was from my perspective. Could you tell me how I could have handled that better? Because I really want us to work well going forward. That's it. Vulnerable, honest, straight talking. You apologize for actions that have been that
I
have
felt
maybe
that.
gone
Like,
wrong.
wow, they
But
really care.
yeah, that's if you really care, you have to show you really care. What's wrong in being vulnerable with how you say it, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's really, really important. Oh, another hack, how can I forget this? Something I found useful. It's a bit sneaky, but it works. Why not? Which is be still sincere. When you tell people that if they are rude to you, right, and they say something that I found interesting, I've started doing only recently, is I use sorry, but in a very different way. So I'll say, for example, Diana said, well, that was the silliest thing you've ever said, Deepa, and that hurt me, right? So I will say, I'm sorry, Diana, did you really mean to say that?
Oh,
Now, you see how I have actually, it's rude if I say, did you really mean to say that? Because that would be like, huh? But when I say, I'm sorry,
defenses come out.
Diana, did you really mean to say that? Suddenly that's that, oh, how do I answer that? Now they will think twice before they're rude. So I use these little hacks where the I'm sorry or now excuse me can be very patronizing. Don't use excuse me, because that sounds rude. But
True.
when you say I'm sorry, that word is so weighted. Why not use it in the right way? So
Yeah, I love that. It's the tone,
yes,
it's the delivery.
yeah,
It like the second the sorry, did you mean to say that?
yeah,
Immediately defenses come up.
correct.
I noticed that
Yeah,
rather than sorry, did you mean to say that?
that's right.
It's giving me another opportunity to rectify myself in the
Correct.
moment.
And giving benefit of doubt.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I love that. Thank you so much for answering that. Um, with that being said, we will have to end our session for today as we have reached the end. Thank you so much to everyone for being here today, for all your questions, for all your feedback, for all your participation. We really appreciate it. We hope that it has been a beneficial
Yep.
session for you, and as well for Deepa for being here.
Yeah, it's been great sharing lovely questions, very, very real and authentic. And I've been through that. And I know I made so many mistakes, like I said. So,
I love that.
all the best with your conflict resolutions at the workplace. And remember, conflict can be a good thing, it can promote growth.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day, and feel free to download the slides and give any feedback. And yes, bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.